Welcome to the MS Dev Show, episode number 114. This week we talk with Lori Lalonde about localization and globalization, building a BitTorrent client in C#, how becoming a pilot may be a better programmer, and Jason installs high-definition cameras everywhere.
This episode of the MS Dev Show is brought to you by Infragistics, providing tools and solutions to accelerate design, development, insights, and collaboration for any organization.
This week, we're pleased to welcome back Lori Lalonde, Windows Platform MVP. She wrote a book on Windows Phone development. She is Xamarin certified and a Xamarin MVP. She's Microsoft certified. She's a conference speaker in the US and Canada. She's a blogger and a user group leader. Welcome back, Lori.
Thanks for having me back, guys.
Yeah, so Carl was like, hey, should we have Lori back for? And I said, yes.
That's exactly how it went.
Yeah, exactly.
What it was. Like, it didn't matter the topic. We could talk about anything.
Yeah, and then I don't know how I don't know if it was linked on Twitter or something, but I saw you speaking at Xamarin Evolve, and I watched that video, and man, that was really impressive. Like, great job. And it wasn't even like the content or anything. You were so confident and comfortable on stage. I'm so jealous.
Thank you. Despite the technical difficulties, I cringe when I watch that back.
No, you did awesome though, because I don't know, I'd try to make a joke and it would be a horrible joke. But you did a really good job. Like, you were asking questions of the audience and you handled it really well. It was good. I wouldn't cringe. It was really good from my perspective. Because your opinion when you're watching your own stuff doesn't count.
I suppose.
I know that. Okay, Carl, who do we have for the Infragistics Ultimate Winner of the Week?
This week, the winner is Trish Curry. She was formerly a guest on the show, but she also took the time out to tweet at us. When we were talking to James Montemagno for Xamarin Updates, we had shown off this demo promotional mug that we actually are going to be customizing and making MS Dev Show mugs out of. And she happens to work for the company that we're ordering these from. So she says, I'll take one. Thanks for the promo of our promo mug.
Yeah.
And we're actually really excited to get these down there ordered. They're in development right now, production, whatever you want to call it.
Whatever magic happens that we
whatever magic happens that involves putting ink on mugs to make them look pretty.
Yeah.
That's what's happening right now. We're excited for that. So thanks, Trish Curry, for being excited for that and tweeting at us. And if you would like to get mentioned on the show like Trish, send us an email to feedback@msdevshow.com. Comment on Facebook, YouTube, or Stitcher, and we really love those 5-star iTunes reviews.
Yes, we do, and we have a lot of them out there, so thank you guys so much. That's just really an honor to get all those. Oh yeah, let's jump in the news. Let's see what's going on here. So, building a BitTorrent client from scratch in C#.
Sounds pretty intensive, Jason.
Yeah, this is something totally that I would not do. But yeah, go ahead, Carl.
This one was really cool because it wasn't just like, I did this, it's awesome.
Yeah.
But he kind of went through like exactly the steps that he took and kind of reverse engineering the protocol, the file formats, and showed you step by step like what his thought process was, and then the code like side by side. So that's what I thought was really cool about this. I mean, not a lot of us would be like, I want to write a BitTorrent client. But like he did, and he showed exactly, like I said, the code, the thought process, the steps involved to make it, you realize you're like, hey, if there's maybe not a BitTorrent client, but if you want to, make something else out there, it's totally possible. Somebody else made it in the first place. A lot of times it is possible to go and, do that same type of thing. You just need a little bit of, prodding most of the time. And I think this was a really good article to just, motivate me to think, what are similar things that I want to build or.
Yeah. And I love how documented this is. So this is more than just a blog post, right? So I actually did like a save as PDF to see how long this thing is. It's 77 pages of describing the code. And actually one of the coolest things I think out of this whole thing is just understanding the BitTorrent protocol a little bit better. And it's actually pretty simple. I mean, it breaks this down into blocks, and there's different pieces. And then it just shows how it's basically sharing those pieces around, and then how it, does hashes to do verification and things like that, and to build up the file. And then, how it handles like dynamically adding and removing clients as new clients come in and drop off and those types of things. So this is cool just to understand too, how BitTorrent is working kind of under the scenes there. Okay. Software has diseconomies of scale, not economies of scale.
Yeah. A lot of us kind of, we write a lot of code, and we think, hey, we write this line of code and it ships out to all these different places. That's got economies of scale. But if you actually look at what the metaphor really is, it's not the same. If you want to compare it to something physical, this article talks about like a gallon of milk. So, when you make something, if you package more of it into one package versus, the same amount into many multiple packages, that saves your production costs and gives you an economy of scale. Whereas software has the exact opposite. If we can write, something small and ship it out everywhere, that's better for our economy of scale that way. So it's not an economy of scale, it's a diseconomy of scale. So, if you want to hear it better worded, you probably want to read the article.
Yeah.
But, it's just one of those things. You hear it a bunch, and if you don't take the time to think about it, you might be repeating it. And it's not entirely right.
Yeah, it was funny because the discussion we had before the show, Carl's probably like, please don't mention this. So we were talking about, the milk carton. So the bigger the container, the more the economies of scale, right? So the bigger the carton, or if you have an entire truck of milk, obviously that's, per gallon is super, super cheap to distribute at that point. And then the article talks about like, you want to, with code, you want to build, ideally ship, like if you write one line of code, you want to ship that one line of code. You want to be super agile. So, I was just kind of thinking out loud. I'm just like, oh, this is basically like, as you're milking the cow, we want to get this to somebody to drink, like,
like straight in their mouth,
straight in their mouth, udder to mouth, as efficiently as possible. That's what software is like. So, the strangest, analogy ever.
That is pretty screwed up.
And so that's some insight into how my mind works.
So did he write this article because he was trying to promote the agile movement and get people away from waterfall? Was that the point of it?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because waterfall like appears to be, it seems to be sort of an economy of scale. Like, if we pile all this stuff together and ship it as one big thing, then we've achieved economies of scale, but that really isn't the case in software. That's actually, it works opposite.
Yeah.
Okay, how becoming a pilot made me a better programmer.
Yeah, so for a lot of different occupations out there that are entirely unrelated, there's a lot of concepts that flow over back and forth. A lot of times you hear that being a musician and being a developer are two different talents that have a lot of crossover. But this guy was training to become a pilot. And he said there's a few takeaways that he learned, even though being a pilot and being a developer are nothing alike, that he thinks that really help both professions, like not treating, systems as black boxes. If you're in a situation where you're having an emergency, sometimes it does help understanding what a carburetor is and how that works and how that's affecting the problem that you're having. Kind of like if you understand HTTP and how it works and how it delivers packets across the internet, when you're having a problem, that helps bring that additional context in. So when you are having an issue, it's not just like, well, I called HTTP client and I gave it my thing and now I don't know what's going wrong. Understanding what's going on underneath the hood really does help. And, it's, sometimes you don't think of, when you do cross training into other non-related areas, how much it can actually affect your main profession.
Yeah, and when you're flying and something goes wrong, I think one of the other things I'm picking up out of this is having backup instrumentation, even if it's not the same type of data. Like, you just want everything available, and I think that's the same thing you want in production software, right? So if something goes wrong, if you have no instrumentation, you're basically flying blind, as they say, and that's that's not going to be a good situation. So have the good instrumentation, but then also think about, okay, when that fails, what do I have for backup instrumentation? So yeah, lots of good parallels here. So good read. Self-care matters. Pay yourself first. So this is the latest post by Hanselman.
Yeah, and this one was really kind of important to me and kind of hit home because it happened at the same time where I was out camping. I was taking time to be with my family, and my appendix was giving me problems.
Yeah.
And I actually had to cut that short and have that taken care of. But I also, there's part of me that I just wanted to rush back to work. I wanted to, I'm out of the hospital. I'm feeling fine. But, I actually took a few extra days off to just be with my family to make sure that I was feeling a lot better. To kind of take time for me, take time for my family while I already had an excuse to be off, make sure that I'm when I do come back, I can be as successful as possible.
Yep. Very important.
And he didn't really cover that per se, but it's a lot of those kind of same concepts. He's saying, maybe you can't take time off per se. You can't afford an extra day of vacation, but maybe you can cancel a meeting or two. Maybe there's a few of them that you're just there for support, or they don't really involve you being a primary person. Maybe somebody else can cover it for you. He had a really cool concept too of paying yourself first. He said that he doesn't use credit cards and neither does his wife. They give themselves an allowance, which if they need to, they can get like a Visa card or an Amazon or an iTunes card. And I thought that was kind of cool. And not only that, but taking time out for each other. They have set up date times, and not only date times with each other, but me times. Make sure that when you're off of work, that, you have time that you're not just filling it constantly with other things. Sometimes it's easy when you have a family or kids to, maybe you're a scout leader, maybe you volunteer at a church or something else, that you're not just constantly giving away, you're having a chance to build yourself up too.
Okay. And he says, schedule massage, have your nails done, get a haircut.
Yeah.
Hopefully you're getting regular haircuts.
I think the point was like self-care.
Yeah.
Some people I know they're very uncomfortable with doing those things, but there's other ways they can take care of themselves, right? It's just like whatever you need to do to feel good about you and be you, just go do it. I mean, when he listed dance in there, I was like, yep, I do that. I dance all the time. Like, I love it. It's a release for me. So I can just be around the house looking like a goofball. I don't care. I can be in my car, be bopping to songs. I don't care. That's like a release mechanism for me.
He didn't explicitly say it, but one of the things I got is don't feel guilty about taking care of yourself.
Right. Yeah, that's probably the biggest takeaway, honestly.
Yeah. Well, especially as parents, like you do feel guilty if, when you have little children and you do take that time for yourself. I felt guilty doing that in the past, and my children are grown now, but back in the day, I felt like so terrible if I was having a good time by myself and all I thought was they could be here having fun with me. But it was really important to have that away time and just to kind of revitalize your batteries, like recharge your batteries.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and then the last thing we were going to talk about here was, so I bought a new house recently, and I installed a whole bunch of security cameras, and Carl was asking about that, so I figured I'd just take some time on the show to talk about that real quick. And we'll actually have links in the show notes on msdevshow.com to all of the hardware that I purchased. But essentially, I bought some Hikvision cameras. It's kind of a funny name, but they're really good quality cameras. I've done a lot of research on this, and I had the same brand at my last house. But with these new ones, these are actually a new model that just came out a few months ago, and they're actually 4 megapixel. And the quality on these things is just absurd. You can see like the finest detail in there, and I'll see Carl will pester me, and I'll get him a good. Actually, I think you have a picture, Carl, from the camera.
Yep.
So we could include that in the show notes as well, so you guys can see what I'm talking about. But it's just absurdly good quality. And then at night, these cameras shoot out infrared, and even in pitch black, like it looks like daytime almost. The camera quality is really good. So these cameras are all PoE cameras, or power over Ethernet. So you run a single cable to them, a single Ethernet cable, and they actually get the power from the Ethernet cable. You just need a power over Ethernet switch. And those cameras are right now on Amazon, they're $114 a piece. And they're weatherproof and all that. I mean, they're like IP67 rated. They're pretty hardcore. And then the PoE switch is about $50, and we'll have a link to that as well. But I bought the TP-Link PoE switch. So TP-Link has been a pretty reliable brand for me lately. So I bought that brand of switch. So it has actually 8 ports on it. 4 ports are just regular, switch ports, and then 4 of them are powered. So you can essentially run 4 of these cameras on top of that. And then I had to buy some Ethernet cable. I always buy all my cables from Monoprice, and they have really good quality cable. So I picked up 1,000 feet of that for $81. Of course, I already had 2,000 feet laying around, but I had to buy another 1,000 feet because I wanted to match the color of my siding, because I did have to hide some wires like near the siding, and I wanted that all to match. And I had to buy some wire staples as well that were also the same color. So the way that this all works, you can obviously go to Costco and buy like this whole security system in a box and do it that way. I like to do it the geekier way. So I buy the software called I bought this software years ago, actually, called Blue Iris, which is about $60. And this software, it's just amazing. Like, it is like super, super sophisticated security software. So it will hook into, I think, like up to 60 cameras, but it'll look for all your IP cameras. It supports hundreds of different brands of camera. And the whole point here is that I can just mix and match. So I actually have a Foscam Wi-Fi camera in my garage. I can use that. I can use my external cameras. I have this camera that I got for free at CES like 8 years ago. Just some really weird, firmware on this thing, and it even hooks into that. It will hook into like pretty much anything that you can possibly imagine, and it lets you go in there and set up different motion areas for each camera. But not only that, you can actually set up like different zones. You can actually set up like 8 different motion areas in the picture. So you can say, okay, if a person walks between zone B to C, or B to C to D, or any kind of combination like that, you can actually set that up to record, and it can be buffering before that, so you can record all that. Anyway, you have to look at it. The list of there's like thousands of features in the software. Anything that you can possibly think of. Can also trigger an alarm system off of that, or have an alarm system trigger the recording of the software. Like I said, pretty much anything you can think of. So I've had people say like, why do you go through all this trouble, and like, what, are you just that paranoid? And so my old camera system at my last house actually paid for itself. There was basically 2 occasions. So the first one was we poured that concrete edging. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but a company comes out and they put this nice concrete edging around your landscaping on your house. That truck literally drove away from our house. And then the mail carrier came around, and she drove through the concrete edging that had just been poured. So it was wet cement. She drove through it, and then, drove away as she delivered the mail. So that was to get that replaced was $300. But I was able to file an insurance claim and say, hey, I have this on video. And then the other instance was I had an HVAC company come out to fix our furnace. The furnace was actually under warranty, so all they would do is charge for labor. They drove to my house. They sat in the driveway for 15 minutes. They came in the house, took 10 minutes to replace a part on it, went back out in the driveway, sat there for 15 minutes, and then drove away. They sent me a bill for an hour and a half of work. So I called them up and I said, okay, this guy, the actual time that he was out of his van, like actually working on this job, was 10 minutes, and I have it on video. And they were like, oh, geez, okay, it's on video. Here's your refund. So, for those types of situations, it's pretty handy. And then, in our new house here, the garages just tend to be smaller. I had an insanely huge garage at my last house, but now we have a small garage. Fitting both vehicles inside is technically possible, but realistically is not really an option. So one of our vehicles now has to sit on the driveway, and there have in the past been break-ins into vehicles in the area. So, that's the type of situation where you just want to have a video so you can go to the police and say, you know what, I have a crystal clear picture of this person's face, and you can see them clearly breaking into my vehicle, and the police will love you if you're able to supply that to them. So it's just peace of mind for that. So I don't know. Do
Yeah,
you guys have any questions on that?
well, it's pretty amazing because we have security cameras throughout the house, but they're all indoor. But they
Yeah.
point towards the all the points of entry of our
Right.
house,
Right.
and we do have an extra one that I made sure that we bought, which is a puppy cam, which just
Oh yeah.
focuses on the dog
Yeah.
because that I had to have that. It was just an absolute must.
Yep.
I absolutely love it for, like you said, peace of mind, and also, yeah, it's not just about worrying about people breaking into your house. I mean, we have people coming in and out of our house all the time. We have a dog walker that comes throughout the day when we're not home. We
Yeah.
have cleaning ladies that would come in and out of the house. And it was really interesting because we had a similar situation where the cleaning ladies came in and they were supposed to be here for 3 hours and they were in and out in 45 minutes. And oh boy, you can tell. I didn't even have to come home from work to know this because I was getting notifications on my phone when we also have a door lock, which is a keypad. And we have specific codes for each of them. So I get notified when they unlock the door, who unlocked the door, when they come in. I also get notifications from the camera of any movement. So I see 3 still images of the people coming in and out of the house.
Yeah.
And we can also go in and watch the video after. But so at work, when I saw the notifications come in, I saw that they had come in and then they had left. I thought it was a joke. And so I actually called the cleaning company and they're like, are your ladies done already? Because it's been 45 minutes and you guys were supposed to be there for 3 hours. I paid for a full clean today and I was absolutely irate about it. But
Yeah.
I was at work and I was able to handle it and they came right back. And they put in the time they were supposed to. They cleaned what they were supposed to. But and I didn't have to come home at the end of the day and be surprised to have that added stress of adding a note onto my list of, I have to call them in the morning and complain. No, it was handled immediately. So
Yep.
it saved me on a few instances like that. Or when the dog walker showed up late and I'd call them and say, hey, you guys aren't there yet. Do you need me to just go home to take out the dog? Because I'm very particular about how long she stays in her crate for.
Yeah.
And I really don't like the idea of her being in a crate too long. So yeah, for those instances, I found it completely useful. And there was one time I actually caught on video and on those cameras my dog making a jailbreak from her crate, which was super amazing.
Yeah.
So I was able to leave the office, and I like to pretend I left the office very cool and calm, okay, I'm just gonna be back in a few minutes, but I didn't. I saw it come in and I was like, oh no, and I'm like, I have to go. I will be back, and then
Yeah.
I booted out of the office and I was only 5 minutes away from the house, luckily.
Yeah.
Got here and our clean basket of laundry that was nicely folded and put down, done. She was laying in the middle of it when I came in the house smiling, this big, because she's a Samoyed, so she always looks like she's smiling, and she just had this big goofy grin on her face, and I'm like, oh God.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so it's
I
good for that
absolutely
kind of
love
stuff. Yeah, I have a video too, from our last house, a storm where the kids had this house thing, this plastic house that we have, and it was blowing away, and so you get some cool footage like that as well. But yeah, I have one more side of the house where I have a camera arriving, so I have 4 power over Ethernet cameras, basically covering every side of the house. So that, if something does happen, then I'm covered. And like I said, I have one in the garage. I really don't have any in the house, but I didn't think to have one kind of pointing toward the, the back door, something like that. So, yeah, so I think this is a great way of doing it, because it gives you the ultimate flexibility. Now, if you just want this all handled for you, then just go get Dropcam or Nest or something like that and just pay them a monthly fee. But this has no monthly fees. Ultimately, I think this is cheaper in the long run, but I had to go through and fiddle with this stuff, but I get super high res video from all these cameras, and it works pretty good.
Nice.
Okay, well, let's finally talk to Lori, because that's why we're here, right?
I don't know. I'm enjoying this conversation.
Yeah. Let's just talk about fun stuff the whole time. We do a couple of those episodes, so if you want to come back for one of those, that would be awesome. We'll just have.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just have a, random stuff episode, and those end up being popular too. So people like it when we talk about nothing in particular. So let's do a horrible episode where we talk about something specific.
With
that setup. Yeah. So let's talk about localization and globalization, which is, one of those things where it's you wish you didn't have to deal with it. We all do. So I think everybody wants to just understand how to do it better and make it.
Or we should be doing it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You absolutely should be doing it. Not enough people do it. But hopefully we can try to make it a little bit easier for people and get them up to speed. So I guess first of all, Lori, what is localization and what is globalization?
Okay, well, localization is setting up your, well, I guess in the terms of developing an
Mm-hmm.
application, is setting up your application to support multiple languages. And then globalization is more so to also support the different formats like date, time, left to right, right to left. So these are things that, especially in English speaking countries and cities, that, we often overlook that because we just assume everybody around the world speaks English. And I've been
Mm-hmm.
guilty of this. This has been an afterthought time and again for me. And just recently, like, I guess, now that I'm doing mobile applications and you're really responsible for the markets you're pushing it out to and who you're targeting, that's come more to the forefront of,
Mm-hmm.
now as a, you're not just working for a company that's going to tell you when is a good time to implement multiple languages. Now you're working for yourself, and you're putting out applications that people are going to use around the world. So you might want to, be thoughtful about who you're targeting and what language they speak. And if you don't want to target multiple languages right now, that's fine. But so I kind of put together this whole session, which I've delivered at quite a few user groups already. That's been really popular. Of the things that you should think about, and how to architect your application, just to set it up for localization, even if you're only supporting English for now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and yeah, I think it is nice. It is like quote unquote like nice to do it for people. Just to say, hey, we do support your language. But I think even more importantly than that, there's a lot of cases where there's just like huge market opportunities. The U.S. market in depending on what your app is or what you're trying to sell, could actually be like a tiny portion of your total addressable market, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that to me that's the biggest thing too, is like there's actually monetary incentive as well to do this. And then what we're talking about too, you mentioned the number formats and everything. So for the hopefully everybody that's listening knows this, but I guess if you don't now you will. There's a lot of places that use they swap the comma and the dot for numbers. They use different symbols for different types of currency. Date formats are different everywhere. That's
Yeah.
just an absolute mess in the entire world. And actually, what I end up doing, just because it's logical to me, and I'm kind of a geeky developer, right? Anytime I write a date, I always do year, month, day, because pretty much everybody. There's a couple things like everybody when it's written that way, I think everybody reads it properly. And then the other thing is it's sortable, right, in file systems. So you can make sure you zero pad each number, but it makes it so that I can sort everything.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, I learned that was back in my GE days. It was my boss at the time. He was saying that number four, like, we just use that for everything because, like I said, it was there was no confusion, because if you write, because in the U.S. we do day, no, what do we do? We do month, day, year, which makes no logical sense whatsoever, right? Um,
And in some countries, it's day, month, year.
yeah, exactly. And the problem is if the day is like zero
April
three,
1st.
zero three slash 04 slash 16. Like the 16 isn't ambiguous. Actually, it would have been like back in like the year '05, right? But you look at that and you're just like, there's no way to infer what the person actually meant by that. So if you do a 4-digit day, so you do 2016 dash 07 dash, I don't know what today's 18 dash 18, it's less ambiguous and it's sortable. But
Well, it's
anyway,
also less ambiguous because there's no month 18, so you just used a terrible example there. Just
yeah,
kidding.
yeah. You get the point though.
Yeah. No, totally, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it's really neat, and I speak about it specifically on, especially with mobile app development. I mean, it's set up already to make it so easy for you to architect your applications to support localization. With the Android, it's like just a built-in system of, as long as you put your strings file, which contains all your translations, it's just an XML formatted file. As long as you put it in a certain directory, and then you reference all the strings in your layouts, just by a unique ID that you gave your string translations, it just pulls it all in. Like, there's no code
And we can't hear her now. We can't hear you,
Can you,
Lori. There we
can
go.
you
You're
hear me
back.
now?
Yeah, can you
Yep.
hear us?
Yeah. Yeah. Where did I drop off at?
Oh, it was just like a few seconds ago.
Okay, good.
We got the
All right.
XML and the IDs and all that good stuff.
Okay, so the Android system just kind of pulls it all in, and there's no code necessary when you're referencing your strings that way, which is really nice and it's super easy. And then with iOS, it's the same thing. There's a convention to it. You have a key value pair file. It's just a text file, but it's .strings is the suffix for it. And as long as you include all your translations in that file, and then you just pull it in through code in iOS, then you're off to the races. And then for .NET developers that are targeting Windows, there's ResX support in .NET. So they should already be comfortable with that. So I think that what I start off with is just don't hard code your strings. Architect it in such a way that you're pulling them in from a resource file of some sort. And the systems are already in place to handle pulling that in. And then I also talk about other options for providing those translations to your application. There have been situations where clients prefer JSON as the resource file format, and we download that JSON file from a web service at runtime. So we're not packaging all the languages up at runtime or at once. But when we publish to the store, we just package it with the default language. And if they switch languages in the app, then we pull down the language that they want. So that way, if they're supporting 184 languages, we're only packaging the one JSON file for the default language, and then we only pull down the one that they want after that.
Okay. Infragistics ultimate UX and UI tools and enterprise mobility solutions, Share Plus and Report Plus, enable high-performance apps on any device, faster data insights, simplified collaboration, and market-leading security, all backed by comprehensive support. With Infragistics Ultimate UX and UI Development Toolkit, you can ensure mission-critical applications delivering a superior user experience on the desktop, web, and native device environments for iOS and Android. With the latest BI tools, wow your users with dashboards providing the data insights that they need when and where they need it, all at a low total cost of ownership. Try it today. Download a free trial at Infragistics.com and follow them for the latest updates in UX and UI development, reporting, and collaboration at Infragistics on Twitter. And remember, each week, if we pick your comment on the show, you will get a free copy of Infragistics Ultimate UX and UI Toolset.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, I mean, you had mentioned like you can just worry about this later, but I mean, should I be worrying about this like from the beginning? Like, because I'm just terrible with this. Because whenever I start writing code, I'm all excited and I'm focusing on what I'm focusing on, and I'm always thinking like, oh, there's probably just like one line of code I can call that'll get me the localized strings. So am I just being like a horrible dev by not using that? Should I just be using that from the start? Should I go out and do that research and figure out what line of code I should be calling?
It's not that you're a horrible dev. I mean, we all just kind of get excited when we start coding and we start just kind of, we're off to the races. But when you find yourself hard coding strings in your layout files or in code, stop yourself and just think, no, this is going to be more work for me down the road. And train yourself and force yourself into a situation where you're going to practice the configuration of it. And so now, there's no hard-coded strings, and just kind of make it a rule for yourself as a developer. I'm not going to put hard-coded strings in my layout files or views or storyboards or whatever platform you're targeting. They reference, they're called different things, but I'm going to put my strings in a resource file, and then I'm going to access that. And I know it's a little bit of work up front, but you save yourself so much headache down the road when you do need to support multiple languages, because pulling out those strings manually as your application grows becomes more work, and you're going to miss things, and it becomes quite of a headache. And when you're thinking localization as well, if you have that at the forefront of just you're formatting and you're architecting your application in that way, you're also thinking, oh, I shouldn't be using fixed lengths for these text fields because in different languages, they can translate to different sizes. So what could be one line a one-line sentence in English could be a multi-line sentence in another language. So you have to be really aware of not setting fixed height or fixed width on those fields, and just allow the sizing to naturally like expand or collapse as as the translation needs to be. So pulling out the strings is a stepping stone. It's the first step. The second step is thinking, how are the different ways could this be rendered if it translates in a longer phrase or a shorter phrase? And then you have to be cognizant about that and designing your views so that you're not in a situation where text is going to get cut off. And then you have to start thinking, okay, well, eventually there could be left to right, right? Now we're doing left to right. That's the standard. But there could be languages that support right to left, right? Middle Eastern countries especially, right to left. So then you have to start thinking about how does your view affect that layout. So I think it makes you more aware of what you're doing and how you're representing things in your view as well when you start thinking in those terms.
So, I have a question too. So you said like you should put, first step is to move all of your strings into your resource or strings file. But, in some languages, if I want to have like dynamic content in the middle of a string, let's just say we have a countdown app where we're counting down minutes to something, I might put in there like, you have, and then like some sort of placeholder that'll get swapped out, minutes remaining. And in some languages that might be different. So how do I handle like when I want to dynamically insert different content in there that in a language you might need that in different places in the sentence?
Exactly. And I do touch on that when I talk about it in my session.
Okay.
So you don't want to, what developers tend to do initially is translate the sentence in parts. And that's wrong because it does translate differently.
I always felt like that was wrong, but I've done it.
Yeah, I mean, we've all been guilty of it. We're all, we've all had those, shameful moments where we've done things like that. We know we're wrong, but essentially just have the entire phrase as your one string translation. And in the spots where you want to substitute in values, you just use the standard placeholder format that we do in .NET, which is the squiggly brackets 0, squiggly brackets 1. And then when you're pulling that translation out, obviously you're going to have to pull it out in the code behind and do a string format on it and pop in the values that you want, right? So that's essentially how it should be handled when you have situations like that with dynamic content.
And then one question I had was around like cultural differences. So, like I can imagine things that would like offend other people, but the other big thing I had heard this from a teacher in college, and I don't know if this was true at all. I'm less likely to believe people now, but she was saying that in some country, and I wish I remember the name of it. And I'll have to see if I can do some research on this to like, verify this story or see if it's on Snopes. But there was a country where what they do is they for food items, whatever the food item is. So like if it's spaghetti, like they are required to have like a picture of the spaghetti on the container, right? So like you're in the grocery store and like you can see exactly what's in the containers. Like, okay, this is this thing. And I guess they were like horrified because like Gerber entered that market and they have like the picture of the baby on the baby food, right? And it's not a picture of baby food, it's a picture of a baby. And people were like, oh, like, why are you selling, it looks like you're trying to sell baby at the grocery store. So again, I haven't been able to verify that story, but, now I'm always like worried about inadvertently offending like an entire culture with something like that. Cause I don't understand the rules of every place. So have you seen any cases where that like happens in software, or are there any considerations like that? Are there countries where, I don't know, like too much information on a form is, for some reason is a bad thing, or I don't know, certain colors. I don't know. I can't even think of what the actual scenarios would be, but have you ever seen anything like that?
Well, the things that I've been aware of as far as the differences among countries, especially when you're publishing the app, you're made aware of it every time when you're selecting the markets, is to be aware of content that could be deemed offensive to them.
Yeah.
And they generally list out the countries where there are restrictions on the type of content that can be delivered to those countries. I don't remember off the top of my head the list of topics or the countries that were involved. But I do remember seeing that every time I would have to publish an app, it was to the Windows store. And there are certain countries that you do have to be cognizant of the type of content you are delivering and do more research on that, as well as, what was my thought? I had a thought, and then I just lost it. Oh, well. But yeah, so that there is that, and even like how you're dealing with data.
Yeah.
I mean, each country has restrictions on how you use data, or where you store that data, and depending on the type of application it is. So you really have to, and that kind of gets into privacy laws and other areas that you have to be cognizant about, for sure.
Well, I think one thing that goes to Jason's question, though, is I know somebody who had an app rejected. It was a pretty innocuous app, but he had an in-app purchase, essentially a tip jar, and he said, "Buy me a beer." Well, in a lot of Middle Eastern countries, alcohol's illegal, so he ended up having to switch that out to, buy me a latte or a cup of tea or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
that
tricky.
makes sense. It's definitely tricky, but that's the nature of dealing with when you're out there and you want to reach multiple markets and in areas that you're not aware of what their traditions or their cultures are. It is difficult. It's like it's a tightrope, and a lot of the times you're going to learn by trial and error.
So, how do time zones and like daylight savings time, how does that relate to localization and globalization?
Oh my God, it's why I have gray hair. I don't think there's a good answer for that. Like, I don't think anyone's figured out how to do date time properly in all
No,
of the
there's a
different
flag
people.
now in your program. There's a Boolean like in the project prop. You just set that and you're good to go.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. It's terrible. And I've spoken with people at like very, very public companies that you think they would have mastered date time, and the developers shamefully, admit to me they haven't mastered date time yet, or dealing with time zones. There's actually, and I can't name those names at all, but I've had quite a lot of interesting conversations around that topic, and I'm telling you, whoever solves that problem, they can charge a lot of money for their solution. I'm telling you.
Yeah, I'm going to use this time to push my agenda of abolish time zones and daylight savings time. Abolish it all. Seriously, get rid of all of it. It is such a hassle. And I still even when you do it correctly, like in Outlook, you schedule. I had a meeting scheduled. I think I've talked about on the show before. I had a scheduled meeting with somebody in India. It was at a time that was perfect for both of us. And then DST came around, and now it was at, totally awkward times and just totally screwed it up. So sometimes it's not even possible, I think, to deal with those things properly.
Yeah.
So I've heard that I think it was Coding Horror. It was Jeff Atwood. He said that Turkish is the best language to use for testing. Is that your experience? Have you heard that?
I have never heard that, and I have never ever targeted that language, so I have no idea. And what was his basis for that?
So first of all, everything is just wonky in Turkish. I'm probably offending them now, but so they their dates are formed. Remember we were talking about that. So they do day dot month, day dot year, and then they do the commas and the dots are switched.
If you take a string and to lower it and then to upper it, you might get back a different string. Because they have certain letters that in uppercase they have certain accents on. So if it's like he shows like integer all caps to lower to upper, you get a dot on top of your I.
Interesting.
Yeah, so he's actually got a logo here, passed the turkey test.
That's awesome. You need to send me this link. I need to see this.
Okay. I think that would be in the email that Carl sent you at the last second. That I didn't have time to look at. Yeah, exactly. Very professional here. And then we'll have that in the show notes as well. But I think the point is that basically Turkey has has all of the things that could go, or that all, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. All of the things that get complicated when you're dealing with these issues, they all happen to occur in Turkish. So by basically testing in Turkish, you're covering yourself pretty well. And do they have double byte? I don't think they have double byte characters though, do they? So maybe you have to pick like like Chinese and Turkish or something like that, and then you probably have it covered.
Yeah, that's strange. Yeah, Chinese is a difficult one. I know
Yeah,
that. Oh God,
yeah,
but
yeah. Because
yeah,
you also have to have a
But
font, right?
he said the other nice thing about Turkey is it's similar enough to other Latin alphabet that it's not like a gigantic engineering nightmare. So like if
Mm.
you use like Chinese, or that one's quite a bit different, or if you use some of the Middle Eastern ones, they're right to left. So there's other engineering things to work with, whereas if you want to get most of your headaches out of the way, it's similar enough that you won't have to like re-architect your app significantly if you haven't done it right from the beginning, but it's also goofy enough where you're going to hit all those those pain points for testing.
Years ago, I was installing, like I was setting up images for testing, and I was installing, I think it was like Windows 2000, and then it was Windows XP, and so I'd have to install in every different language, and I memorized the Windows install sequence, so I could actually install Windows in any language. I didn't have to read any of the prompts. I could sit there and hit next and put in the key and all that kind of stuff without even thinking about it. What was kind of interesting, I think it was with Chinese. The characters in Windows, I didn't realize this exists, but it actually has a pop up like an extra application that would let you draw your own characters. So you can actually like draw your password. You could draw like a smiley face, and that could be your password. I thought that was pretty wild.
that's neat.
Yeah, I mean that's got to be really challenging to work with that. So, we talked about some of the tools. You mentioned like, it's built in. And when I was at a previous job, like a long, long time ago, I actually wrote custom tools to do all of the globalization and localization. So it would actually export from a database all these, text prompts, and then we would send them off to somebody to get translated. They would come back, and then I had a little tool that would put it back into our database so that we could ship it with the product. I gotta imagine though that there's better tools out there than this like custom in-house thing that I built. So like, what kind of tools are there for me to do this? And I guess the other question on that is, do those tools then, are they part of services that let you get your these strings translated, or how does that whole thing work? What does that whole process look
Um,
like?
Awesome. So, well, for tools for managing, and that's a big question, is for sure, like that's something everyone wants to be aware of, is
Mm-hmm.
that the tools that you want to use for translating, it depends on what format of resource file that you're using. So for Android and iOS, there really isn't a tool that I found. I mean, one's an XML format, one's a key value pair. But with .NET and ResX files, there's a tool called ResX Manager. And it's really cool because there's a standalone application, but there's also a Visual Studio plugin. So as a developer, I have the Visual Studio extension for ResX Manager installed in my Visual Studio IDE.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I'm looking at the resource files, and I want to know which languages have the translations and which ones are missing, I just load up ResX Manager. It automatically picks up the resource files in my solution, and it shows me in a spreadsheet format, and each column is essentially a language, and each row is essentially the string translation. And anything that's missing a translation, that cell is in red. So it's easy to see where the missing translations are and where to fill them in. And as you change a translation in in the ResX Manager, it changes it in the file. And you can add new languages from there pretty easily. And so it's very intuitive for developers to use, but also for translators to use. So the translators can download the standalone extension. So when you email off your set of resource files to them that are ResX format, they can just load up ResX Manager, point to the directory that those resource files are in, and they can work with it just like it's an Excel spreadsheet.
Okay.
So they don't have to learn how to format XML. They don't have to
Perfect.
learn because sometimes that happens where they format things incorrectly when they're trying to follow that XML format or ResX format when they're trying to manually modify the translations, and you have one thing out of line there, and things break. And imagine going through a resource file that has like 100 translations or more in it, and it is painful to find out like where things are going wrong. So that's a really good tool to use. As far as if you want to have a tool that automatically translates for you, if you don't want to go through translators, there's the Multilingual App Toolkit. That's something that's also an extension you can install in Visual Studio. And a lot of Windows Phone developers were using it because that kind of was promoted a lot when we were in the midst of Windows Phone development. But it still applies when you're working in Xamarin, your cross-platform projects. You can still create those regex files and get your Multilingual App Toolkit loaded, and then pick the language you want it to translate to, and it'll translate as best as it can. I believe it uses the Bing translation engine behind it. I believe that's what it does.
Carl's nodding, so that must be a yes.
Yeah. So it may not translate perfectly. There may be things that are a little bit off, but if you can't afford to pay for a translator to get full translations, I mean, that's a good starting point.
So
and trust me, if you have something translated wrong, someone will tell you, and you'll get that feedback.
Yeah.
And you can always correct it.
So I know that there's translating services that you can, like say, translate this English into, whatever language. But if I gave it like the output, would it be cheaper for them to verify that? Is that something that's possible to do?
That's a good question, and I guess that's a deal you'd have to make with the translator or the company that you're going with, right? I mean, if you get a freelance translator, I bet you could work out a good rate.
I was going to say, it probably costs way more to sort of do that verification. If they do the blind translation, I mean, then it's just so quick for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but if they can, like, I mean, if you could work out a rate where you're like, well, I already have it translated, can you just kind of read through and make sure it's correct? I think that would be less time, actually. I don't think it would be more time. It's quicker and easier to correct spelling mistakes and grammar mistakes or words that are not used right, rather than actually typing it all out from scratch, I think. But I don't know. I don't know that their business model and how they work, but it would be good to try. I mean,
I just thought of something too. So sorry for putting you on the spot, but like, have you ever seen anybody just store like their translations on GitHub then? And just let somebody do a pull request to fix a typo,
like an open source.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that, but that would be cool.
Yeah. Why not? Why not open source your translations, and then if you're missing a language, let somebody fill them in.
I know that there is a site where you can give them your regex, and it's basically you can ask for it to be crowdsourced. It's not guaranteed to be fulfilled, but I know that there's a site out there that can do that. Yeah.
But I'm thinking of like the step after that too. Like it's out there. And maybe there's some missing or some that are just incorrect. And
that is cool having it in GitHub, though.
Yeah.
Well, and at a recent event I went to, actually, someone recommended that wouldn't it be neat if there was a standard set of files in all the languages that had all the common words that we use in every application, and that everyone, and so it's just available via open source. So wouldn't it because there's always the standard search.
Well, you can't translate by word though, right? You have to translate a phrase.
No, but there's.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Right? In most applications, commands. You have the standard commands, right? Yeah. And a lot of the common phrases. And someone just said, wouldn't it be amazing if that was open source and already done in every language? And then those are a handful less of translations you have to worry about or whatnot.
Absolutely.
I don't know. I just thought that was kind of neat. But yeah, it would be neat to have if you open source your translations and you're like, hey, contribute to this. That would be amazing.
We'll have to have somebody send us some mail if you guys are aware of some of those efforts going on in the community. That'd be kind of neat to see.
Because I know that Google Translate doesn't get it right 100% of the time, and I'm sure Bing is the same way.
Yeah.
I remember when my daughter was getting a tattoo, and she had this phrase that she wanted it to say in Arabic, and because it's a phrase my mom used to always say to her, and so it's kind of in memory to my mom, and so because we are Lebanese, and so she wanted to get it written in Arabic writing. So she went onto Google Translate, and she's like, oh, this is what it is. And I'm like, you know what? I'm like, how about I just send that to my cousins and see what they say? Because I have cousins who know how to read Arabic.
Yeah.
And so my one cousin replied back, and he was like, that absolutely does not say what you think it says. And
well, the quick way to prove it is to translate it and then translate it back. Right. And if it's something, well, and that's just one test. I mean, that will just tell you if it's horribly wrong.
Yeah.
But even if that's right, that still doesn't show you that it's right.
Yeah. So we were lucky that we kind of had her tattoo sentence, crowdsourced by my
Yeah.
relatives, and they were able to fix it. And so we got a proper translation for her, and she got the tattoo, and it looks amazing. And she's so proud of it. She shows it off all the time. But can you imagine, had we not had access to somebody that could verify the accuracy of that statement, how awful that would have been?
Yeah, I hear about that a lot. I hear that a lot with tattoos. So
Yeah, so we talked a lot about how we can make our app good for our users, but one thing I've been thinking is, what considerations do we need to think about when we're like having input from a multitude of people in different languages? I mean, obviously, the first thing I can think of is like, let's record what language that they're using when they send us input back. So that's kind of linked. So we have a good idea that maybe this is Italian. Are there any other considerations that, we should be thinking about on input?
That's a good one because I tend to I have a few apps and they're strictly English apps. Like they're set up for localization, but I don't have any other translations available for them. And one of them is an app, which is a community app. People could submit drink recipes, right? Like so you have you're at a bar and you have all these different drinks and like all the popular ones are in there and it's all in English. And I've actually talked about this with my significant other. It's like, what if we wanted to support multiple languages? What would you have to do? And the best thing that we thought of was actually have a separate database that's just for each language. But then it's like that becomes a pain because then they'll never be in sync. And so I'm not sure like the best way to handle it, because can you imagine having an app where you have people from all over the world contributing content to it, and how do you translate that to store, and how do you translate that back? And I don't have a good answer for that.
Yeah, and you want them to be linked, right? So it's like if
Yeah.
you're, because you might have a second language where you're not that proficient, but maybe you're looking at that by default to get to see the widest range, and they say, oh, this is also available in my language, so you want to be able to like switch the language and still see that same drink.
Yeah, and so in situations where you're controlling the content, it's so much easier. But in a situation where you have an app where other people are contributing content, oh man, to me that's like equivalent to the date time issue and time zones and crap. Like,
Yeah.
that's so difficult. So I just, even in thinking about it, I became paralyzed. I'm like, this is so big of a problem, and it's not an easy solution, and it would take some quite a bit of time and thought and architecture, I think, to if we wanted to have them all in sync. But if we didn't care if they were in sync or not, then we would just have separate databases per language, and the content would be specific to the country that or the language that they're targeting. But I don't know.
Okay. Any other considerations? Any last comments, questions?
No, just I'm really happy you guys asked me to come back.
This is the last time. No. No, I'm totally kidding. Okay, so let's move on. So, Carl, what do you have? You have like a lot of dev tips here.
Yeah, I have a lot of dev tips, but like a few of them are short. So one thing I noticed that if you use OneDrive and you have like a code file synced up in there, like a JS file, there's IntelliSense in OneDrive. So if you have like a person object that you've defined, you can do like person.firstname and it'll show you when you hit that dot, just like regular Visual Studio or VS Code.
So it must be using Monaco.
It must be. And the thing is, it's like, if you're not expecting it, if you're not expecting it, it's pretty awesome to see.
Yeah. So I don't know if we talked about it on the show. We should have, but so that editor that's in there you can use it. So it's open source now. So it was, like I said, it was Monaco. Actually, I think we did talk about it on the show. Yeah. So originally there was this thing called Project Monaco, and then it was basically Visual Studio on the web. And then not many people used it, I don't think, but it was awesome. So they used Electron Shell to put that into VS Code. And then the funny thing is, then people were like, well, I want to be able to use that on the web, but like embed it in my own applications. So then, that got split out it got packaged in such a way that you can include it in your own project. And actually my project, we're working on integrating in this editor. But yeah, I mean, so it's just a portable editor that works everywhere and is really awesome.
Yeah. The next item that I have is on GitHub. Microsoft has published some UWP UI basics.
Okay.
So if you're looking to make like a UWP application, that's an application that can hit big Windows, phone, Xbox, IoT, but you're not used to XAML or the UI and how that works, they've got a nice example that shows, how to use XAML, how to do a basic layout, and how to get an adaptive UI. So how you can just basically take that one UI that you've written and make sure it looks good on a small phone screen, on an IoT setting, maybe even on a big Xbox, 70-inch TV. So check that out. And also the last one is an iPad app, and also works on the iPhone, called Continuous. So you can write C# and F# on your iPad. They've got a bunch of examples on there using like Xamarin Forms, and being able to just, as you're typing, being able to get a little bit of IntelliSense, and you can actually run the code right away as soon as you're done typing it too. So
can I say something about that? Can I say something about that? Okay, I was at .NET Fringe, and Scott Hanselman did the keynote there, and he actually talked about this app, and it is freaking phenomenal. I mean, the fact that you can program C#, F# on your iPad, and as you're programming it, the change that you're making is being represented, in the preview. It's amazing. And to that point, I actually met the developer in person. So Frank Kruger showed up there, and I absolutely had the biggest geek freak out. I was like in awe. I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe I'm meeting you in person, because I've used, the portable class library that he developed for SQLite on, in Xamarin. So like SQLite.net, his PCL, I've used it so many times, and I see his name all the time. So, and then seeing that he released this app, which was amazing, like it's brilliant. If you have an iPad, download it, please, and just watch the magic, because it is awesome. But then to meet him in person after he just released this amazing app, and be able to say to him in person, like, wow, you are awesome. This is great. Okay, I'm done. Sorry.
Well, yeah, so I'm looking at the reviews. This thing kind of fascinates me. I can run an IDE on my iPad and iPhone that performs better than Xcode does on a Mac Pro with 12 cores and 32 gigs of RAM. And he's selling it for $10.
Well worth the $10. I paid for it.
God,
I've used it on my iPhone already. It's great.
Well, it seems kind of like it can't be that great on an iPhone, right? I mean, I would think you'd want
it's
an
not
iPad, right?
as good. He really promotes it for the iPad.
Yeah.
But it works good on.
You just
the
got the
iPhone.
iPhone for free, right? So, can you do the whole app on this thing? I mean, like really?
I would maybe have a hard time doing a whole app, but if you have like a CI environment where you can make some edits, it's great for even like not small but not medium, that kind of in between code changes. Like if you need to fix some bugs, if you want to add another feature while you're out on the road, you don't have to lug around a laptop with something like this. It's great, and you can make all those changes on your phone. You check it in. That would be great.
Yeah, because Frank says, I resolved to use my iPad Pro for software development in 2016. He said that December 31st, 2015, and then he came out with this app. So, like, this is very interesting. I might have to, I'm working on a Xamarin app. I'm wondering if I have to borrow an iPad.
A great question for him is, once he got the initial proof of concept done, did he develop it on an iPad?
Yeah.
Well, why don't you get him on the show to talk about it?
Yeah, if only we had some kind of like development podcast. Oh wait, we do.
He is amazing, and I'm telling you, to talk to him is awesome. Like, oh, I couldn't shut up when I was talking to him, because he's so easy to talk to. He's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's awesome.
And the iPad Pro, it's too expensive, but. Yeah, I don't know. Because I'm working on a Xamarin app, and it is like a huge hassle. If you can sit there and, because I have this for people that are on the video. I have this nice keyboard that can hook up to multiple computers all at the same, or, multiple devices at the same time. It's actually a really nice keyboard. Yeah, if I could do that for development, that would make things interesting. So I wonder what that's actually like. Anyway, we're spending way too much time on this.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
No, it's not your fault. It's Carl's fault. So we'll have a link to that in the show notes. So we'll have to get him on the podcast. That would be awesome. That was a great idea, Lori. So that totally made the whole having you on worth it just for that thought too.
Yes. Just for that little nugget of information.
You need to be the MS Dev Show consultant.
No problem.
Yeah. Okay, so what I need you to... most of my cards for the game that we play are at work, so I'm going to pick a number for you. Let's see. Actually, pick a number between 2 and 4.
4.
Okay, 4. Would you rather eat 3 raw clams covered in grape jelly or a cup of strawberry yogurt and tuna fish mixed together?
I would say the strawberry yogurt and tuna fish.
Yeah.
The clams, that just grosses me out. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, the yogurt and tuna, like... Yeah.
I think you did. I think
I
you
might
can
have
mix
that
it
for
enough
lunch.
That's
that
like
you
soup
won't
salad.
notice.
Yeah. I
You
might...
mix it in enough, you won't even notice.
Yeah.
And I like tuna. I think tuna's good.
Yeah. Okay, Carl, you're picking number 2.
All right. I'll have 2 then.
Would you rather have a jar of jelly beans that never goes empty or a magical stereo that can play any song you want to hear?
Well, I already have the second one, so I'll take the jelly beans.
Okay. Do we already have this one on the show?
No, but
Okay, crossing it off.
I subscribe to Groove. I have Pandora. There's a lot of other services that you get free trials for all the time, so I can already listen to any music I want.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, were these questions devised in like the 80s? Like, are they a little outdated
It's meant
maybe?
for children. It's meant for children.
But it doesn't have... here, I do have the instructions here. So rules of play. So let's see. Copyright. 1998, 2004, and 2007. So it was updated in 2007.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I don't think Pandora was around back then.
No. Yeah, that was like when the iPhone was like, came out that year, and we weren't sure like if that was going to be a thing or not. So Lori, where can people find you?
So Lola.ca is my website. I'm also part of the Western Devs group, so you can go on to westerndevs.com and see me there. I participate in their podcasts on a regular basis, so you'll hear my voice a lot more often. And yeah, just on Twitter, Lori B. Lalonde.
Okay. Yeah, and we're going to have a link to a whole bunch of different things, but we'll link to your Evolve session because you were just like super confident. I loved it. You were awesome.
Thank you.
Carl, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Carl Schweitzer.
Okay, and you can find me at ytechie.com or on Twitter at twitter.com/ytechie. So, Lori, thank you so much for coming on again and talking to us about localization and globalization. And, of course, you are welcome on the show anytime.